Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to recap a bit now, since we've been over the weekend, what we've been reading. Remember, Roman Catholics in England had been suppressed because of the incessant attempts of the popes to get control of the British government, to overthrow the Protestant crown and Protestantism, and to put in its place the Pope and his cardinals and his bishops and his archbishops, and to take over the country and to make the country Catholic. And for whatever reason, and I insist it's because futurism had gained a foothold in the minds and hearts of many prominent Englanders began to have sympathy for the so-called suffering of the Roman Catholics and the laws that were still on the books that seem to put Roman Catholics at a disadvantage and literally made Britons bigots, anti-Roman Catholic bigots. And in sympathy for the liberties of Roman Catholics, England began to put down its guard and began to rescind some of these laws and guaranteed that they would not enforce others on the books. And one of the liberties that was achieved by this event was that it would no longer be illegal for the Pope to issue bulls and encyclicals and to govern his church. That is, the Roman Catholics in Great Britain. And immediately upon that crack in the door, Cardinal Wiseman was called to Rome. He was celebrated as the victor over England. He was sent back to England, carrying with him the first papal bull from the Holy Roman Pontiff, and read the bull publicly and had it published, which was heretofore illegal. And then immediately upon reading the papal bull, he read his own encyclical or pastoral letter that he had written. And in his pastoral letter, Cardinal Wiseman said, quote, "We govern and shall continue to govern the counties of Middlesex, Hertford, and Essex as ordinary thereof, and those of Sussex, Surrey, Kent, and Berkshire, and Hampshire, with the islands annexed, as administrator with ordinary jurisdiction." So the very first thing right out of the box, once given the opportunity for the first time in a generation, a first time for the Pope to issue a bull and to communicate with Roman Catholics in England, they immediately set up their own government. And they literally took over part of England, the counties of which I just named. He says, "We govern and we will continue to govern," and then he names the counties. And this is concrete evidence of what has been said here on Inquisition Update, that the papacy regards himself as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He cared nothing for the legitimate throne of the Queen, nor of the established government of England. He simply instituted his own government in Great Britain. And this cardinal brought forth the announcement. Not only read the papal bull, but then issued his own pastoral letter. And he declared himself the governor, a temporal king. And the point that I was making last time on the broadcast is, seeing for yourselves in the reading of this book, by the way, the title is Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. We're reading on page 35 of the book. Immediately upon given the first opportunity, Rome took over in England. Now, the suggestion that I made last time was, after seeing concrete evidence for ourselves, exactly what Rome always does whenever she gets the upper hand, my suggestion was, what do you think took place in this country immediately after the ecumenical movement of 1965, when Protestants seem to have forgotten completely their Protestantism, having now believed in futurism for 3 generations. Rome simply said, then the Protestant Reformation is over. But not only that, the Protestant Reformation was a mistake, because the Protestant Reformation was built on the assumption that the Pope is the Antichrist, the papacy is the Antichrist. And with that notion, you overthrew all the legitimate governments over which I ruled in England. You liberated all of England. You stole all my land, all my people, all my wealth, all of my power, both spiritual and temporal. You've admitted that's an error. Now you must restore it. That's what was decided at Vatican Council II. And does any of us think that Rome didn't take the same opportunity to make that same mandate in the government? That we rule, we govern, and we will continue to govern until this country remunerates the Pope in everything, not only to reconquer the lands that were lost at the time of the Protestant Reformation, but to conquer the rest of the world. The world where the Pope never ruled before. And to do it with your own expense, your own bullets, your own bombs, your own treasure, your own lives, your own blood, and your own guts. And you'll do it until the world is conquered for the Pope. You heretics who have now surrendered and now perceive yourselves to be fellow Christians under the authority of the papacy, you have a debt to pay. You have penance to do for the Pope. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what the United States has been ever since Vatican Council II. A papal proxy warrior, a global police force to restore to the Pope all that he'd lost before the Protestant Reformation, and to conquer the rest of the world for the Pope and make him the governor of the world. That's the role that the United States is playing. And until you comprehend this, until you wrap your brain around this, you can't very well understand at all what's going on in the world today, and who's responsible, and why this is happening. It's because essentially we've renounced our Protestantism. We've believed a lie. The very elect have believed a lie. It's time for us to accept that fact and to return to true Bible Protestantism. We carry upon us the mark of the Antichrist. He now considers us his subjects. He's put his stamp upon our foreheads, because we repudiated the basic tenet of our Protestant faith, that which distinguished Christ from Antichrist, from Jesus Christ and the popes of Rome. And now we're under a Roman Catholic government. It's official. Oh, they don't talk about it on the television. They would rather leave us remain in our ignorance. But nonetheless, they're governing. Now this Nicholas, as he's called, which is Cardinal Wiseman, was sent back to England to literally set up a government for the Pope. He says, we govern and shall continue to govern the counties of Middlesex, Hertford, and Essex as ordinary thereof, and those of Surrey, Sussex, Kent, Berkshire, and Hampshire, with the islands annexed, the islands too, as administrator with ordinary jurisdiction. Okay, the details of that I don't care to go into, but nonetheless, he's named the counties that and over which they govern. The cardinal and his 12 apostles, bishops. They're setting up the diocesan structure, the shadow government, which isn't a shadow at all. It's absolutely the controlling government. And it puts the legitimate government in the shadows. All right? Now, the author, James A. Wiley, says, let us mark the words of quote-unquote Nicholas, that is Cardinal Wiseman. I don't know particularly why he refers to him as Nicholas, but we'll continue. I think it has to do with one of the names by which Nebuchadnezzar, or rather Nimrod, was known, but I won't go into that. He says, let us mark the words of quote-unquote Nicholas. Remember, he's speaking of Cardinal Wiseman, the one who has become appointed to be the new governor over England. He says, let us mark the words of Nicholas, not spoken at random, but spoken in the full foresight that they would be carefully weighed and narrowly criticized. In other words, people were going to pore over not only the papal bull, but Cardinal Wiseman's pastoral letter to try to uncover its true meaning and import. So, knowing that ahead of time, they were very careful in the language that they used. He continues, he says, and therefore we may be sure, selected because they were the terms of all others best fitted to announce the fact of his assumed jurisdiction without appearing unnecessarily to insult our independence or ignore our rights. In other words, it was written in such a way that the legitimate government of England would fully understand what was being said, while the people wouldn't understand it, wouldn't understand the consequences of it, that it was a literal overthrow of the government. Now he says, but cautious as the terms are, the fact stands out in unmistakable prominence. Quote, we govern, unquote, said the cardinal, not the members of the Roman Catholic Church in the counties of Middlesex and etc., but the counties themselves. All right? This doesn't mean that the papacy and this cardinal are setting up a government for Roman Catholics in these counties. No, it has now become the government of those counties, both over Catholics and Protestants. This is a hostile takeover. Now, Americans today, who are all Islamophobic, they've been taught to be so, if a particularly high-ranking representative of the Muslim religion would to come to this country with his 12 disciples and declare an official ruling from their chief religious leader in the Muslim world, and then issue his own pastoral letter declaring certain states of the United States to be under his lawful jurisdiction, what do you think the American people would do? Just lay down? But this is exactly what this Pope and this Cardinal did in Protestant England. It would be an incitement to war. It would be regarded as an invasion of a foreign potentate, one who ruled not in England, but in Rome. And not over even all of Italy, just the city of Vatican City proper. It's an outrage what is happening in Britain at the time of the writing of this book. And you've never heard of it, most likely, because we're not to talk about such things. The Protestant Reformation is over, see? They've taken away all this information from us so that we can't make sense of what's going on in the world today. Because we're no longer the governors, we're the governed. And we have a right to be governed and not to govern. So therefore, we're on a need-to-know basis, and if we don't need to know, then we are not allowed to know. We're slaves, abject slaves. We can't make intelligent decisions for ourselves or our children or our posterity. We're not given enough information to make intelligent decisions for ourselves. And so we're simply just like a herd of cattle. And they can do with us whatever they want. And this is what's about to happen in England at the time of the writing of this book. He says, let us mark the words of Nicholas, not spoken at random, but spoken in the full foresight that they would be carefully weighed and narrowly criticized by the government, the legitimate government of England, and therefore we may be sure selected because they were the terms of all others best fitted to announce the fact of his assumed jurisdiction without appearing unnecessarily to insult the independence or to ignore the rights of the legitimate government and the people of England. But cautious as the terms are, the fact stands out in unmistakable prominence. We govern, said the cardinal, not the members of the Roman Church in the counties of Middlesex and etc., but the counties themselves. We govern and shall continue to govern the counties of Middlesex, Hertford, etc. The cardinal knows nothing of any other authority from that of the Queen right on down to her humblest functionary. The cardinal does know no other authority in Great Britain but his Pope. Now, if that's not a hostile takeover of the government and a literal physical portion, a great portion, a very important portion of Great Britain, I don't know how else to describe it. He says, all comments of ours is superfluous, says James A. Wiley. Nothing we have to say of ourselves is matters. He says, quote unquote, Peter, that is the Pope who claims to be the successor of Peter, the current manifestation of the Apostle Peter on the earth, the Pope, the vicar of Christ, the one who has said that he is the rock and foundation of the church and not Jesus Christ. He says, Peter hath spoken, and Nicholas hath interpreted. The cardinal and his suffragans govern, not English papists, but England. So there was a new temporal government in England. And he says to show that he regarded his acquisition as neither visionary nor ephemeral, but on the contrary, solid and durable, this man in purple, that is, this bishop, Cardinal Wiseman, lifts up a paean of triumph so loud that the whole realm rings again. We seem to hear the shout of some old warrior as, dragging his captives after him, he slowly climbs the Capitol. So sits Cardinal Wiseman in his triumphal car as he proudly climbs the Capitol from which he was to sway the scepter of government. Okay, James A. Wiley is making this cardinal out to be a conquering general for his chief in Rome. And he says he drags behind him an illustrious captive, England. And he sees the celestial hierarchy bending from their seats to gaze on the grand spectacle which made this a day of glory to his church. Quote, truly, he continues in his pastoral, this day is to us a day of joy and exaltation of spirit. the crowning day of long hopes and the opening day of bright prospects. How must the saints of our country, whether Roman or British, Saxon or Norman, look down from their seats of bliss with beaming glance upon this new evidence of the faith and church which led them to glory. And all those blessed martyrs of those latter ages which have fought the battles of the faith, how must they bless God as they see the lamp of the temple again enkindled and re-brightened, as they behold the silver links that chain which has connected their country with the Sea of Peter in its vicarial government, changed into burnished gold, unquote. Flowery words, words of triumph. The Holy Roman religion has been reestablished in Great Britain. Great Britain, once Protestant, has now been led away captive in golden chains put upon them by Rome, the Antichrist of the Bible, the papacy. Now he says, let it be marked that it is the country which is bound to the Sea of Peter, although it's cardinal considerately, not with a chain of steel, but of burnished gold. Ah, fetters! But then they are of gold. It were unreasonable, surely, to complain of such fetters. No, Rome was placing gold chains upon their subjects, and therefore they should be led away glad. Golden chains of Rome, but the Bible doesn't call them golden chains. He calls them iron chains. And that's what they are. And you can paint those chains any way you want. They are not of God. They are of Rome. The iron of the Roman Empire had returned to Protestant Great Britain. This is a declaration of the conquering of Protestantism in Great Britain. There's no other way to cut this. There's no other way to describe this than the conquering of in Great Britain. And it was all brought about because of some sympathetic, emotional, lunacy that had come over Protestants in England. You know, I'm tempted to use a phrase that is probably overused, but in this case it rings true. Give Rome an inch and she takes the country. Give Rome an inch and she takes the country. And we're only talking about the experiences of Great Britain during the times of the writings of this book. This was the case all out throughout Roman history. Whenever Roman Catholicism was in an oppressed minority, they were meek as lambs. Whenever they reached parity, they were sly as a fox. But whenever they gained the ascendancy, they roared like lions. That's how all of Europe was conquered in the first place. That's how the so-called patrimony of Peter was accomplished. Subtly, over time, with much effort. But Rome did eventually conquer all of Europe. All of that was overthrown at the time of the Protestant Reformation. Rome was nothing in the world at the time. And yet, the most Protestant nation, arguably the most Protestant nation in all of Europe, Great Britain, became just a bit sentimental or a bit sympathetic toward Roman Catholic needs, and given the opportunity, the Pope took over. What could have possibly happened, really, literally, after Vatican Council II? We'll be back right after these messages. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. And if you'd like to support the program here at Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. And if you'd wish to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. That's tom@seawaves.us. Just like the waves of the sea. Okay. Back to this most distressing record of history given to us by James A. Wiley in his book Rome and Civil Liberty. He says, equally jubilant were the notes pealed forth in the Romish Cathedral at Birmingham on occasion of the enthronization of one of the quote-unquote 12, the same number as of old, seeing it as the second planting of Christianity, he says in parentheses, Dr. Ullathorne, now styling himself, quote, Lord Bishop of Birmingham, unquote. So they've enthroned themselves under the authority of the Pope as governors over a large portion of England, and they've given themselves titles, Lord Bishop of Birmingham in this particular case. And it says the preacher was the English pervert, Dr. Newman. In other words, Dr. John Henry Newman, who used to be Protestant, had gone over to the Roman Catholic Church. That's why James A. Wiley calls him a pervert. Okay? He uses his words carefully and wisely and correctly. He says the preacher was the English pervert, Dr. Newman. Quote, the mystery of God's providence, he exclaimed, is now fulfilled. I do not recollect of any people on earth but those of Great Britain who, having once rejected the religion of God, remember when it was when Roman Catholicism was replaced with Protestantism, having once rejected the religion of God, were again restored to the bosom of the church. That is, the bosom of the Antichrist church. Do you comprehend what he's saying? He says, but what has God done for them? It is wonderful in our eyes. The holy hierarchy has been restored. The grave is opening and Christ is coming out, unquote. So that's how this John Henry Newman, perceived this miraculous change in Great Britain. That Great Britain had come back to life because the Roman Catholic hierarchy in the country were reestablished, and the temporal throne of the Pope was ensconced right there in the most prominent place in Great Britain. A country, Great Britain, who had once rejected the religion of God, the Roman Catholic Church, has now been reborn. They're singing Te Deums because the Protestants in Great Britain have literally surrendered their country without a fight to the Antichrist of the Bible. And John Henry Newman is jubilant, just as was Cardinal Wiseman and the Pope and all the entourage in their celebration at the Vatican just before the promulgation of this bull and this pastoral letter. All Catholics believe in their heart that the true religion of Jesus Christ has now been reestablished, which literally means the government has been overthrown, and that the Pope is now the governor of the country, and his agents, the cardinal and his 12 apostles, bishops, were in charge now. And again, I point out, I don't mean to be repetitious just for drama, but imagine what happened in the United States after Vatican Council II. This is history repeating itself. What we've just seen, what we've just witnessed in Great Britain, happened on an even larger scale in 1965 here in this country. Protestantism surrendered. So what do you expect the very first thing that occurred after that surrender? The Pope literally claimed jurisdiction over the country. And your political representatives, whether they know it or not, they don't serve you, they serve the papacy. And that's why we're fighting and dying in papal proxy wars all over the world. That's why we're now the crusader, the great crusader for the Pope. Now he says, we give but one specimen more for those vauntings, regarded as hallucinations at the time, the fumes of Roman pride, the maunderings of papal dotage. Alas, it has since been found that the marauding was on the side not of Rome, but of some of our statesmen and ecclesiastical dignitaries, who then spoke and wrote some very valorous things, but afterwards could find nothing to back up their big words except little deeds, or no deeds at all. Quote, the Pope, said the tablet of that day, has made Westminster an archiepiscopal see, in other words, a government of an archbishop. And he has given to Dr. Wiseman, now a cardinal, remember he was elevated to cardinal, jurisdiction over the souls of all men living within the limits of his see, excepting, that is excepting, excepting or excluding Jews, Quakers, and unbaptized Protestants, unquote. So anyone else besides, except a Jew or a Quaker or an unbaptized Protestant, were now, whether they like it or not, whether they know it or not, and most of them didn't, were now regarded as the subjects of the Pope. And he says, thus did the Romanists, holding that a work of this sort so well begun was as good as finished, deemed that the schism of 3 centuries was now healed. The schism of 3 centuries was now healed. In other words, the Protestant Reformation in Great Britain is over. You see any similarities here? He says, thus did the Romanists, that is the Roman Catholics, holding or believing and maintaining that a work of this sort so well begun was as good as finished, deemed that the schism, that is the Protestant Reformation of 3 centuries, was now healed. That the Hydra, the monster of British heresy, was crushed. That the first sovereign on earth was virtually converted into a subject of the pontifical throne, and the mightiest of existing empires legally annexed to the Empire of Rome. There you have it. In as clear terms as can possibly be given, Rome claims jurisdiction over all England. The Pope claims to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords of all of England, the entire empire. He says 15 years have since passed away. Do these vauntings now appear groundless? Have these hopes been shown to be illusions? Has Rome slackened in her work? And having begun, does she despair of making an end? Have the foundations of the new papal temple in Britain, laid in 1850, been razed, R-A-Z-E-D, in other words, destroyed to the ground, demolished, by the authority of British law and the strength of British Protestantism? Are they rotting in the ground amid the faint hearts and feeble hands of Romish builders? Far from it. Whoever has retreated, these men have not. These men have not. Their hopes are as high and their boastings are as bold at this day as they were then. And with reason, too. For the building then begun has neither been stopped nor gone back, but is advancing to its completion from one day to another. And the very same words that I just read in this book could be said of once Protestant America today. America, post-Vatican Council II, is still becoming Catholic by the day because no one has protested the takeover of Vatican Council II. No one has protested the Roman Pontiff's takeover of Vatican Council II. So what if Protestants in America finally comprehend what literally happened at Vatican Council II and decide no longer to go along with this new government, but to restore him to his rightful place, Antichrist, the man of sin, the son of perdition? What if that happened? Do American Protestants have the courage? Do American Protestants even have the courage to admit that Vatican Council II was an error and that they have been deceived by futurism? That's the ground floor for the restoration of Protestantism in this country. We have to admit to ourselves that futurism was our downfall, that it is a grievous error, a grievous deception. I'll say it again, and I'll say it a million times. It was the greatest deception since the Garden of Eden, because it destroyed Christ's creation, the Protestant Reformation. What would happen if today all of America would recognize the error of futurism? And what advantage futurism created for the Pope of Rome, who has taken advantage of that delusion, the success of that delusion in the Protestant world, and have taken over the government of this country by mandate. What would happen tomorrow? I tell you what, I believe this country would be transformed overnight. If all of a sudden America in unison, everyone who carries a Bible and believes it's the Word of God, stood up and said, we no longer believe in futurism. The Protestant Reformation was a movement of God. It was our deliverance from Roman tyranny, just as was God's deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt's Pharaoh. The Vatican Council II was an apostasy. Vatican Council II is repudiated. Everything that has come about because of Vatican Council II is null and void. We rescind our efforts now to conquer the rest of the world for the Pope. We need to help restore the legitimate people government, the popular governments of Europe, and destroy the European Union, destroy all these 10 kingdoms that have been created by the Club of Rome and the Council on Foreign Relations, and return to Christ. What do you think would happen in the throne room at the Vatican? What do you think would happen? You know, my Bible says, my precious Bible says, that the wicked flee when no man pursueth. And there's no one more wicked in this world than the man of sin. He doesn't even need to be pursued. He just needs to be exposed, and he will flee. Do we have the courage to admit we've been duped by futurism? That we've made a grievous error? Do you think that if we got down collectively on our knees in sackcloth and ashes and repented before the Lord, true repentance, now understanding that it was He, Christ Himself, who caused the sacrifices and oblations to cease 2,000 years ago when He gave up His life for us, in the midst of the week, in the midst of the 70th week of Daniel, that if we all of a sudden understood the prophecy of Daniel, which was forbidden for the Jews to understand, the very prophecy that caused them to miss their own visitation by Messiah, do you think that if we confess to the Lord that we've been deceived and now we understand the true meaning of that prophecy and the true fulfillment of that prophecy, and that we believe the Protestant Reformation was a move of God Himself, the strong right arm of God leading us out of our own Babylonian and Egyptian captivity, don't you think God would embrace us with both arms and bless our efforts to enlighten the world about it? I trust that God would literally pour out a blessing from heaven that could not be even counted. But will we do it? Will we humble ourselves and repent of our error, admitting our error and asking God for forgiveness and strength to restore us? It's all about pride, isn't it? Until we swallow our pride and we're willing to accept the fact that we've been deceived beyond comprehension, there's no hope for a restoration of Protestantism, nor a restoration of the liberties that we once enjoyed in this country. It's all about faith. It has nothing to do with politics. Rome depends on politics. We depend on faith. And if our faith is pure, there's no power on earth can stop us. The wicked flee when no man pursueth. We don't even need to carry a sword. I hope my listeners are comprehending what I'm saying. It's just that easy. As soon as Protestantism could be restored in this country, so would our liberties, and our enemies would flee. All we have to do is expose them. All we have to do is use the Word of God and show people the correct understanding of Daniel's prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, verse 23 through 27. And explain to the world that the misunderstanding, the current teaching about that prophecy is the very thing that made Vatican Council II possible. It's the very thing that made the New World Order for the Pope possible. Were it not for our misunderstanding of Daniel chapter 9, verse 23 through 27, Protestantism would still be alive and well and would be the greatest power over our government. We then would have truly a limited government. And liberty would be the heritage of its people. But we've invited the tyrant because we've believed his lies. Now we have to make a choice. Do we want to be bound by those chains of gold, or do we want to be free in Christ? Now he continues, the middle of page 38, The Partitioned Land is the title. They divided up the land. It says, well, but what avails, it is asked, this fine scheme of restored hierarchy? It is a scheme and nothing more. It looks very pretty and very imposing, extended on papal parchment and seen in grand perspective, dressed out with many an artistic illusion, but one thing it lacks: tangibility and reality even. What is James A. Wiley telling you? I'll tell you what he's telling you. There is but one God. He's the creator. He is all in all. He speaks for himself and through his Son. He has no vicar on this earth. He is autonomous and holy. And we're not to confuse the Pope with him. We are not to serve two masters, because there is only one. And all of this pretense that Rome is committing in Great Britain at this time is just an illusion. The papacy is nothing in the world. No real authority to which any man should give heed. He says, well, but what avails, it is asked, this fine scheme of restored hierarchy? It is a scheme and nothing more. It looks very pretty and very imposing, extended on papal parchment and seen in grand perspective, dressed out with many an artistic illusion, but one thing it lacks: reality, tangibility. He says the Pope, excuse me. He says the Pope has but reared an empire in the air. He has left the solid earth to us. And so long as we are masters of it, now this is a Protestant speaking, James A. Wiley, the Pope has left the solid earth to us. And so long as we are masters of it, we make the pontiff heartily welcome to construct as many kingdoms in the clouds as he pleases. Let the Pope build as many imaginary kingdoms that he wants, is what he's saying. He's no king at all. He has no power from heaven. He is a figment of his own imagination, his own diabolical mind. No man should pay him heed. He can't build a real kingdom in this world because only a real kingdom belongs to Christ. That's a Protestant talking. Would to God a Protestant voice would be raised once again in this country. The Pope has but reared an empire in the air. He has left the solid earth to us. And so long as we are masters of it, we make the pontiff heartily welcome to construct as many kingdoms in the clouds as he pleases. His kingdom and ours lie far apart. They are, in fact, in different worlds. And the two never can come into collision. In partitioning England, he might, for all that matter, as well have mapped out the moon, or crossed and recrossed our country with chalk lines, or written with his own apostolic finger, quote, "I govern and shall continue to govern," unquote, upon the seashore when the tide was out. In Wiseman and his 12 suffragans, we have but a repetition of Sir John Falstaff and his men in Buckram. The red hat of the cardinal has not yet converted England, and the throne of Victoria still stands despite the quote-unquote edict hurled against it by the man on the 7 hills. Why should not the papacy take a somnolent fit and fall a-dreaming? And what vision so likely to visit his pillow as that of mighty England, with sackcloth on its loins and ashes on her head, doing obeisance before the papal throne, and in token of profoundness penitence for her sins of 300 years, soliciting permission to kiss the toe of the Pope. But the papacy will awake and find that it is but a dream. We dare say the Times expressed very fairly the general mind of England on the point when it said, in some such words as the following, that the return of Dr. Wiseman to our country, with all his high-flown titles and his bravery of office, need give us no more concern than if it had been the pleasure of His Holiness to bedeck and bedecorate the editor of the tablet in style equally gorgeous, and assign him the puissant rank of Duke of Smithfield. It was natural for us to reason in this matter. Our unquestionable superiority in science, in material wealth, and in political power, the creation, as we boast, of our own skill and courage, has given us an overweening sense, more perceptible to foreigners than to ourselves, of self-sufficiency and self-importance. We are the men. The love of liberty is in our blood. Our freedom lies safely entrenched within the double fortress of law and usage, of our social instincts and our political forms. The Pope, of course, puts his own meaning upon his own acts. But the question is not what he understands by them, but what we understand by them. What do we understand? That's what's important. And we'll be back to give more understanding on the program tomorrow. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. I'll see you tomorrow.